star so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.
Howdy there, I'm Matt McKinley and we're burning daylight.
In the saddle till the job's done right.
Welcome to Burnin' Daylight, the only podcast for the working cowboy.
Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Happy Monday. Hope the weekend treated you all right. It's been, I can't complain here. Tell you the truth, it's been all right. It's been hot, dry. We had some moisture a while back, but it's kind of dried out, and it's gonna be hot for the next 10 days or so. But hey, it's all good. I had a good conversation with Kate Bowen earlier today. You'll hear that on Friday. I will be out of town Friday, so got that one lined up for you. I'll be in Kiowa, Colorado Saturday, helping announce the ranch rodeo for the War Party Ranch. Jeremiah Wilbur and his crew's putting that on, so if you're in the area, come check it out. It's gonna be a good time. Anyhow, I was I've been kind of just kind of over the news here lately. Like it's fascinating, and I don't mind talking about it. But it feels like I'm just repeating myself on here. So it's just it's fucking all Donald Trump all the time. And I'm fucking tired of all of that. So I was looking for something different, and of course when that hits me, and I don't have somebody else to talk to keep me in check, I go down rabbit holes. I go down the a historical route, and go find a loose thread, and you just pull on it, see where it goes, and kind of got to listen to a bunch of different stuff and reading. And anyway, I somehow ended up on Canadian Moonshiners. I don't know exactly how I ended up on it, but somehow that path led me to there. And I texted a couple Canadian fellows and asked if they knew any stories, and they didn't. But they gave me a decent start. Samson Moss gave me a decent starting point on that, and I found some pretty cool stuff. But I kind of just wanted to, like, Prohibition was it was a bold attempt, like that was it was a really big undertaking that they tried to go about, and I don't know how, like, it seemed like it was mostly a bunch of pissed off women. Like, apparently in that time period between the Civil War and and through the end of World War I, the women of America just said, "Fuck you, no more booze." And I don't know, maybe that was throughout the whole world, because as we found out, there was prohibition in Canada too. I didn't know about that because, honestly, I don't know a lot about Canada. I don't think most of the world does. Canada's got more attention here in the last year for being a bunch of tyrants up there than they have in probably the history of Canada. But hey, they're our little top hat up there, and they're our neighbors, and gotta give them their due. So I got a good story lined up on that. But I did not know that Canada had they had prohibition laws, and it makes you wonder, just like, does the world just get in a mood every now and then? They just like, this is where we're all going, like, and you had the whole like imperial thing, all the way up till really the end of the 1800s, and then, and for us it was, we had the Civil War, and then leading up to that, like, it was pretty, a lot of shit going on. Industrial Revolution, bunch of factory jobs that didn't really ever exist before, ever, and then you had a bunch of war, and dudes only lived to like 43 anyways, so like they just, and then the drinking themselves to death might have had a little bit of a part to that. I don't know. I mean, allegedly that stuff's bad for you. And for whatever reason, just like all the women folk, and I could be wrong, could be me being your typical chauvinist, which doesn't really get the nuances, but it just seems to me like a lot of the temperance movement was ran by a bunch of church ladies that were really had their panties in a bunch. And maybe that's just me misreading history, but that's what it seems like. And so, but it seems like it happened. Well, maybe it was just the Western Hemisphere. Maybe it's just us in Canada, because if you go back and watch these accurate documentaries that Hollywood puts out, and maybe is it Hollywood? I don't know. Wherever I guess London, is that where the BBC is filmed, where their big studios are? But Peaky Blinders, if you watch that, you can see how the Brits actively supplied illegal booze to the United States, and like the government just kind of, their government turned a blind eye while their organized crime just pumped a whole bunch of booze. And I'm sure it's 100% accurate being portrayed by Hollywood. But you have to imagine that shit happened. And it is funny. Like when you strike a nerve like that, like that'll make dudes fight. That'll make women fight. You take away their little afternoon sauce and you make it illegal. Oh, yeah, people turn crazy. So I was reading on some of the, like, yeah, you hear a lot about like New York and the rum runners on the East Coast, but you don't hear much outside of like Texas. You had Bonnie and Clyde, but they weren't really bootleggers. And then of course, you had like the Kentucky, Tennessee, West Virginia, where typically where your moonshiners are call home. You had all that going, but you never hear a whole lot about the Western U.S. outside of Texas, like I said. But Bonnie and Clyde, they were bank robbers. They weren't they weren't bootleggers. And I don't exactly remember. And it may have just been I'd heard some stuff about particularly up in Montana about trading liquor back and forth, and then that led to me what should be the song of feature on this, but it's one of Corb Lund's most famous songs, $5 Bill, and if you listen to that song, it's has a lot to do with the whole illicit moonshine trade on the U.S. Canadian border. So that's kind of where I went. So I got to looking up some of the some stuff in that part of the world. And so this is from the Montana Memory Project, and pop it up on screen real quick. But it kind of, it's funny how it just reminded me of kind of a lot of just rural America in general. How Where is that? Montana Memory Project. Here we go. And because it kind of reminded me of of COVID in rural America, where people just they didn't really give too much of a fuck. But it says the decades of the 1920s was commonly called the Roaring Twenties, and this is from the Lewiston Democrat News. Although Lewiston may not have been roaring, the Prohibition law was being flagrantly ignored both here and statewide. By 1928, the Lewiston Democrat News was full of reports on liquor raids. The issue of January 29th, 1928, reported a raid at the Ann Hotel in Moore, where a still and quantity of booze was seized. In March, Ed Reamer, a famed Lewiston booze runner, was caught near Terry by government agents. He had a special compartment in his high-powered car that carried a large quantity of booze, which he was selling at $12 a gallon. The Lewiston paper reported on March 29th, 1928, that 200 gallons of whiskey was seized at a Great Falls raid. And on March 30th, it reported that Burr Hill, a federal prohibition officer, resigned because of lack of cooperation by the public. He stated that prohibition was a failure because it was not backed by a public opinion. Frequent raids, however, continued through this year. That is the most American thing I've ever heard in my life. Is he had a Fed that just quit his job because he had no cooperation from the public. This makes me proud of my country. That's a beautiful thing. So, good job, Lewiston, Montana. That's awesome. It's amazing how it just it brought up all this like the seedy underbelly of America came to life, and then not so much not just came to life, but like came to prominence. Like the Italian mafia, man, they really came to power during the 20s, and it's the same type of thing that is happening in Mexico and Nicaragua and Guatemala and stuff right now, and it's the same type of deal, just a different substance. It's not a liquid form. It's it started as a powder form, and then I guess fentanyl is a powder. Yeah, they put it in. All the other powdered drugs, but either way, it all comes from some sort of illicit substance. And 1920s being alcohol, that was a big one. And I mean, hell, the Kennedys got their wealth from running booze for all their massive, high-minded, hoity-toity, in the air as you're sipping your afternoon tea. Massachusetts liberals, they all bought the Kennedy booze that they brought in illegally. And it's crazy how when people want something, they're gonna go find it. Speakeasy was not a thing until alcohol was outlawed, and then so you had all these bars in New York City that were just well, okay. Would you like a glass of water? I guess, sir. Go watch this new style of music that not a whole lot of people understand, and do that completely stone sober. But we can offer you maybe a glass of milk with your jazz. You do that, sir. No, they wanted some whiskey. They wanted I guess people probably wanted beer, but beer was kind of I bet beer was real expensive back then, because beer is the most, it takes up the most volume, takes up the most space, as opposed to even wine. Wine will takes up way less space than beer does. And then even further than that, and of course you get into your hard booze, and so that's everybody drank hard booze in the in the 20s because that was the most concentrated. So you could carry the most of a spirit as opposed to a wine or a beer. You could pump a lot more, or you could hold a lot more booze with whiskey than you could with beer. And so everybody drank booze because that was the easiest to transport. You could transport the most of it in the least amount of space. Kind of like how we went from opium and laudanum to heroin, and now even further. Whenever a certain drug gets outlawed, then they find a different way to get it to you, and so then they concentrate it. And that's the same thing that happened with alcohol. Like the Germans were big time beer drinkers, still are. But I bet you their schnapps intake went up during the Prohibition because it was way easier to get, a couple gallons of schnapps, and that'll get you drunk several times over, as opposed to a couple gallons of beer that'll last you over for one. Couple. You and a couple of buddies drinking beer and telling stories, that couple gallons of beer will go pretty quick, as opposed to schnapps. That'll get you drunk a couple times anyways. So, I don't know. It's how kind of the market works. And, the weird thing about Canada was that I found out was they also had, prohibition laws, but their prohibition laws were more like on a federal type deal, like not so much dictated by Ottawa. But so in 1916, Alberta decided to enact prohibition, but it was also a weird thing. So they couldn't they could not make it, or I guess they couldn't produce it in Alberta, but they did not ban the import of it. So they just went right across the border to either Montana or to British Columbia, because British Columbia was not under prohibition. So they'd either go to British Columbia or over the border into Montana and bring the booze in legally into Alberta. Well, then shit gets real crazy, because then British Columbia enacts prohibition laws, but I think they also did not ban the import. So that was 1918 or 17 or 18. Either way, just before the U.S. did. So in the meantime, Montana is a boom town because you got all these Canadians that can still drink. They just can't make the booze in Canada. So, but they can still buy it. So you get all these people just flooding Canada with booze. And then all of a sudden, holy shit, now the Americans have enacted prohibition. So now where do we get our booze? And I wonder how much money England made off of us, like Scotland. Like, Scotland's still a country just like living off of World War II royalties on their scotch. I would like to think they probably are. Anyway, back to Canada, because that's like almost England. This dude sounds like my kind of guy. Except he probably worked harder than I care to watch anybody work. But it's a fella named Emilio Picariello. And yeah. So Alberta joins the Prohibition movement in 1916. Emilio Picariello, he was also nicknamed Emperor Pick. He came straight from the old country. He was not Sicilian, even though as he became more famous in the media, they claimed he was, just because Sicily's where all the old school mob ties all go back to Sicily, and so they use they called him Sicilian, just a typical media, gin up interest and intrigue and whatever. Anyways, he moves over initially to Ellis Island, and then he moves up to Toronto, and somehow for whatever reason he goes from Ellis Island into New York, and then up to Toronto. But I guess they're right there, kind of close, anyways. But and much like today, the border was fairly open, from what I understand, and you could just go across. But he did some kind of odd jobs in Eastern Canada, and eventually I think he had a store or something, but he gets in and gets an opportunity to head out to Alberta and run a macaroni factory. Like, no joke. It sounds like a made up story by somebody making fun of a bunch of Italians, and just how like everything, it's a bibbidi bobbidi macaroni, Emilio Picariello. But he literally moved out to Alberta to operate and run a macaroni factory, which, yeah. So, I mean, I guess that could have been a gabagool factory, and that would have been a little bit more Italian, but I mean, macaroni is pretty good. Well, we're talking poor Italians here. Maybe they can't afford the gabagool. But he from there he spins off, and he's quite the entrepreneur. He builds up a couple different other businesses. Like, he had an ice cream cart back in the day. It was like a horse-drawn refrigerator cart, I guess. And he would sell ice cream, and had a couple of restaurants and stuff. And eventually he gets into the booze racket, and he buys a hotel in Blairmore, Alberta. And it's right in the area known as the Crow's Nest Pass. And it was in southwest Alberta, so it was within close distance of both Montana and British Columbia, which initially was the two suppliers of his booze, and then eventually they also became the customers of his booze, and it all became a big old racket, just like the drug game is right now. So he buys this hotel. It's called Alberta Hotel, and it's got this big underground, like a wine cellar type deal. And he bought that, of course, to store all the booze he was selling, and then this was all legal at the time. And then he hires this guy named Carlo Sanfedeli, or also what later became known as Charles Lissandro, and then he had this wife of his who came from Italy, and they called her Florence. She's got a weird name that I don't know. But she was like 15 years old, and we kind of frown upon that today, but for whatever reason, that was pretty like well accepted back then. You think about that, like, I don't know, I guess any 15-year-old girls. Like, I can't think of any just right offhand that I know at a very deep level. But like, my niece just turned 13. Anyway, she's like, I can't imagine her being married or having kids. But if you look at that time, 2 years from now, that's when she starts. That's just how they did it back then. Weird. But But anyway, this dude was like the kingpin, like, and he was really he was kind of an American story, which was a shame he ended up in fucking commie Canada, because he picked himself up by his bootstraps. He hit the ground running, built up a business, had him a family, married him a good Italian girl, moved out west, ran a macaroni factory, fed all the wops out there. I mean, all the wops got fed from that macaroni factory. And now he's like, hey, we're gonna drink of the wine, and somebody needs to buy it, so somebody gotta have the supply, and then it's a me. So there he goes. I mean, it just makes sense. And well, while it's legal, pretty soon then they ban the import, and the U.S. banned it altogether. And so now you just got moonshiners running wild all across the border, and whoever can get the biggest supply is the winner, I think. I don't know exactly how that all worked, but yeah, it's just funny is it started as Montana and British Columbia pumping booze into Alberta to provide sustenance for their booze hounds over there. And then, like, that supply doesn't shut off from America, but it has to get knocked down quite a little bit. But anyway, then you get the gangs involved, and there's a couple other moonshiners involved with this Emilio fella, and they may have tipped off the Alberta Provincial Police. So on September 21st, 1922. Alberta Provincial Police attempted to intercept a convoy of illegal booze, and this guy was just like, he got hanged, and I wonder if like that was the reason NASCAR's not bigger in Canada, and maybe it is. I can't imagine it's anywhere close to what hockey is, but this guy was like the ultimate moonshiner. Should be a NASCAR fan, but he was doing the same techniques that the Appalachian moonshiners would do. They had the false floorboards. They had the extra fuel tank, and they would run decoy cars and spotters and everything. It was a real Smokey and the Bandit situation, don't you know, eh? And yeah, and except their Smokey was like mounted on a moose, I wonder what they made the Prohibition agents wear up, because the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, they got to wear those stupid red uniforms, really look like an asshole, because they're like, hey, we used to be British, but we're totally not now. But we still kind of like them. And that's like their, like you see those guys like busting into Mar-a-Lago. Oops, sorry, we got some orders, real sorry about this, fella. Yeah, I wonder what their Prohibition agents looked like. Well, this dude, anyway, he hires this guy straight out of the old country, and he's got this 15-year-old daughter who may or may not have been like an arranged marriage. Who knows? People did shit weird back then. Anyway, they're running. Okay, so they're headed from Blairmore, Alberta, and they're going to British Columbia to get some booze, and then they're bringing it back. And turns out some of the other local moonshiners had got a little pissed off, and I guess a tad bit racist, because now, like, if we look at things through the scope of history and not just like whatever ideology that they teach in the universities nowadays, but like Italians weren't always considered whites per se. You know, they were also kind of like, also neither were the Irish, even though they're like pasty white. They were also not quite considered in the white category. And so there was some racism towards the Italians, kind of always. But then all of a sudden, like the Italians just got absorbed into the white community, which is weird because I don't feel like they belong as half white. Like I would like them to get back to their rightful place of being. Is that guy brown? Like right where I'm at is where people are like pretty sure, but not real sure if that guy's ethnic. No, that's where the Italians belong in the same class as me. So, but there is apparently some racism towards the Italians back in that day, and a couple of the other moonshiners tipped off the Alberta provincial police and tried to stop them. Well, the hired man, he's in one of the, I think he's in the car that's got all the booze, or no, maybe he just had an empty car. I can't remember, but he takes off. Must have been the empty car because he went out ahead and he broke through the roadblock, but they shot at him and they ended up hitting him in the hand or something like that. And so he ends up getting arrested later and something, I'm not sure exactly what all happened to him, but in the meantime, this Emilio fella thinks his little worker Charles had been shot. He'd, and you know how shit happens when an event happens and everybody tells their neighbor who tells their neighbor, and so then shit gets really blown out of hand. And so even though this guy got blown in the hand, he got shot in the hand, it gets around to Emilio that he got shot in the head. And so he's pissed and he goes down to confront the sheriff. And then things get weird because the sheriff dies. And also he takes this Emilio, he takes Charles Lissandro, the guy that supposedly got shot in the head, but actually just got shot in the hand. His wife, the little 15-year-old, she goes down there with Mr. Emilio to confront the sheriff. And in the midst of all that, the sheriff dies and they speed away. And after a manhunt, they round him up. And the Canadians, being a polite people and apparently respected law and order, were kind of horrified by the fact that their sheriff had just got shot down in the street. And there was one eyewitness to the crime, and that happened to be the sheriff's 9-year-old daughter. So you can imagine, Emilio, being an Italian man and a very otherwise kind of a Northern European type of people. He's not only kind of an underclass citizen, but he was well liked. But the media turned that into kind of hatred against him. But also, the only witness is a 9-year-old girl of whose dad just got murdered in front of her. So not a great time to be this Emilio fella. But leading up to that point, he was a very, very well respected man in the community. He was very generous and would hold these big picnics, and he was good to give out food and clothing and stuff to the poor and the needy. And also when the mines went on strike, as they tend to do, the mine workers went on strike, he helped provide food for the families of the striking mine workers. So he was very well respected in the community. But but it also shows pretty quick that all that goodwill can be lost pretty quick when people just go tribal. And when the sheriff gets shot, and it was I guess a number of different appeals to get this, because they convicted him of murder, him and I guess the 15-year-old wife of his hired hand. They get convicted of murder, sentenced to death, and they appeal it many different times. And it was kind of it seems that I won't say maybe a sham trial, but like definitely not typically what you'd consider a legit trial. And there was a lot of conflicting testimony, and there was no one was ever confirmed. Neither one of them was confirmed to be the actual shooter. Or at least they never determined who actually killed the guy between those two. But there was also like conspiracy theory that maybe somebody was in the crowd that shot the sheriff, and it's a whole big thing. And I'm sure it's big on the Canadian true crime podcast charts. Maybe I'll crack that chart one of these days. Probably not, but. Yeah, kind of crazy. We here in America, we kind of typically view history through our own lens, being the American lens, and it's funny how we just kind of ignore shit that happens right on our northern and southern border. But I had no idea that Canada had prohibition laws. I did know that Nova Scotia and Newfoundland were stopping off points for ships coming from Europe loaded with booze to then go to organized crime in the U.S. And it's really funny how much more powerful those organized crime syndicates became once something got outlawed. Kind of like the drug cartels in Mexico. A lot of people don't want to hear that maybe drugs shouldn't be illegal because people seem to get them even when they are illegal. Like, get them in prison and shit. Like, if you can get the drugs that somebody gets thrown in prison for life over, and you can still get those drugs that he was selling on the outside in prison, I mean, I don't think you're going to stop people from getting it. So I don't. It's one of those things. I hate to say it, but like, just quit that fight. You're not going to win it. We haven't won it. We should have looked a little closer at prohibition and how that spread to not just to the outright disregard for the law, but the rise of these really turned out to be really powerful organized crime syndicates. And it turned your everyday average Joe into a criminal of some sort, just like the folks that get locked up for 10 years for weed. For a small amount of weed, that was kind of the same thing as getting caught at a speakeasy when they did a raid, and you get thrown into the paddy wagon and go spend the night in jail and write a fine or whatever. And it wasn't a big deal, I guess, but it wasn't a small deal. And but then that escalated into the creation of the ATF. I mean, that was a direct result of trying to enforce prohibition, and then that later led to the government poisoning like several 100,000 gallons of booze and distributing it out to the public. Some through backroom deals and channels, but just kind of like the whole crack epidemic in the late 80s of the U.S. government funneling crack into the black community so that they could fund their wars overseas. Where this one was probably even more fucked up because they weren't even trying to make a profit. They were just trying to throw their weight around. They're like, hey, you're not going to drink booze. And so they poisoned a bunch of booze and then somehow spread it out in the community. And like 10,000 American citizens died from that. The fucking government just killed them on purpose, because alcohol was illegal. And like that doesn't get a whole lot of attention. You're like, that who signed off on that? I mean, it was a crazy time. They'd just come out of like the worst war in human history up to that point. And they weren't fucking around, I guess. But they're like, yeah, why don't we? These fuckers are just not getting the message that we don't like them drinking booze. So, you know what? Bring out the poison. Bring out the poison. Where do you think Vladimir Putin got it from? Did we send the Marxists over to the Soviets, or did they send them over here? I think it's probably pretty clear that they sent them over here. But man, how crazy shit. Prohibition. What a stupid idea. But hey, if you don't ban something like that, then certain institutions have no other reason to exist. So you gotta find something illegal. Always first rule of government: make stuff illegal. And on that note, hope you guys enjoyed the show. It was a little bit of a rambler. It's a little late here, but we got through it, and I'm proud of you for that. So anyway, if you'd like to help support the show, please head over to patreon.com /Burnin Daylight, or you can sign up on Spotify for the paid episodes. $4.99 a month there. The tiers start at $5 a month on Patreon. It's the best way to support the show. I'd appreciate it if you did, and if not, it's cool. I guess we're cool for now. Anyway, but I appreciate you guys listening. Hope you have a wonderful week. And if you're near Kiowa, Colorado this Saturday, come check it out. The Ranch Rodeo is gonna be good. Also, if you want to get in on the fantasy football, I believe the draft is on Friday. You have to get a hold of Eric Winkler at Eric Winkler 19, something to that effect. I tagged him in the post. Anyways, trying to do a 16-team league, and we need a lot of people. So anyway, get a hold of him or myself. I'll put you in contact, and it's $20 entry, and there's a payout schedule for first, second, and third, I believe. I don't recall exactly what the amount is, but either way, $20 will get you in. It'll be a fun time. We're gonna do some shit talking and try to make life fun again. Get away from politics. Let's argue about sports instead. So anyway, fantasy football is a good way to do that. So if you want to join up, get a hold of myself or Eric Winkler, and most importantly, stay safe out there. It's a crazy one. So on that note, move your ass. We're burning daylight.
Your eyes up in the morning beneath the stars so bright. Pull your hat down, make sure your cinch is tight. Horses kinda snuffy, cold chill up your spine. You'll get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight. Burning daylight. Burning daylight. In make sure you sit up tall. I can see the horizon, it's looking pretty bright. Well, get your ass moving, son, we're burning daylight.